Hello and welcome to Coding with Creston, or I should say welcome to Space Boss, Creston Coding Space Boss. Hope you guys are doing okay. If you're joining, if you could say hi in the chat. Hello, V. I'm trying to get the chat to appear larger. So trying to figure out how to do that. I was told by Chris that I could get the chat to appear larger if I logged into Restream, but yet it is super small. So I'm trying to figure out how to make it larger. And it's not even showing in OBS. Oh, this is challenging. Well, okay. I don't know how to get the chat to be large. Just give me a second. I hope everyone had a good week. Let me see if I can do it this way. All right, well, it's a little bit bigger there. Okay. All right. So thank you for joining me. So this is the game Space Boss, and I've done some work this week. First, I'll go over kind of the work I did, and then we'll kind of get started coding some new stuff. So, okay. So this was pretty much there last week. So I'll show what it does, and then we'll look at the code together. So if I click on New Game, it brings up, just basically does a scene change, and then set up these different ones down here, and then you can launch into space. So this is space. It's not clear that it's space, but it is space. And you have these different menus that you can bring up, or windows that you can bring up. So they've got the navigation window. So this is a dynamically generated system, and this is of course the sun and the planets going around it. And I really wanted to make the planets go around the sun because I thought it would be, because I thought it would look cool. And I did not make them go super fast because I want them clickable. So to be able to click on each planet because you want to be able to travel to it. Did the sound go down? I don't think the sound went down. Well, someone says I don't think so. Well, anyway, if you keep having problems, let me know. Hi, Fear. Hi, Bill. So now I was proud of myself to start because I looked on the Discord server and for, what was it, like orbits or basically how to do that, and I found a solution and I plugged it in and I got all of the rendering orbiting the sun, all the planets orbiting the sun without a problem. Yes, I can speak English. And I was like, this is awesome. And then I went to try to click on them, but they weren't clickable because the state stayed static right where it was. Orbits, yes. So the state all stayed here and it wouldn't move with them. So I said, I got to figure this out. Because basically it was the renderer that was enabling this to happen. So I had to rewrite the whole thing and got advice from, I think, Command Dolphin and maybe some from Fear and I think Seth and a few others. And the air, of course, referenced something I didn't find before, and that was a solar system example. So I was looking for different names, but I never looked up like solar system in the documentation, but that's ultimately the implementation I used. I kind of look what he did and I adapted it or what that example did, and I adapted it to what you see here. So that's very long-winded, but that's kind of how I got this. But thank you for everyone who helped me figure out how to do this. So, and once you click on a particular planet, you can launch to it, and I think I'll talk about this in a second. So the actual clickable area is here versus where the label is. But it shows you the biome of this particular planet, and when you click launch, it takes you to that ocean biome. So I'm thinking the planets are like, you know, Hoth is the ice planet, and you know, Dagobah is the swamp planet, like Star Wars does, and Tatooine is the desert planet. So I'm kind of biomes, or basically each planet is going to have its own kind of biome. So I'm going to launch off again, navigation. Now I want to go to the tropical forest planet. I click that and I go to tropical forest. So it's basically, this is just doing scene changes, but the intent is to basically you're landing at each location. So I guess the first thing I'll talk about before getting into the code is that I'm trying to figure out why the border is off from the label. And I'll show you the code and talk about it in a second. But let's jump into the code finally, and we can see what I did, or the damage that I've done. And the first thing I'm going to look at is the procedural generation, or the dynamically creating a galaxy on each new game. So if we go here, so I created a class, a galaxy class, and it can contain systems. So that's all it contains right now. And when it initializes this class, it just creates an array of systems. It takes system names. So basically I came up with 30 different system names, just coming up with them out of my head. And when I got to 30, I said, okay, I'm done now. Maybe I'll add more later. Maybe I'll dynamically generate the names based upon different syllables. But for right now, I was done at 30. So I get the number of the systems, and I iterate over that number of systems. And I'm doing a little bit of a funky thing here. I'll explain. What I tried doing is just creating those 30 systems in an array and then shuffling the array, because Ruby has a shuffle option, but it was not very random at all. So what I ended up doing is this while loop, and basically picking at random one of the systems, deleting it from that copied array, or the cloned array I have up here, add that system to the array, and then keep doing that. So I'm basically clone the array, and then I'm creating this new systems array that's going to be stored in the galaxy class and setting it up that way. So basically creating a new system, it takes us to the system class. How are you doing, 68STO? So now we're taking a look at the system class, and when I'm initializing that, it passes in the name. So the name is coming from this system names. Now the quadrant names, again, that's another constant of quadrant names. Basically, there's just 4: alpha, beta, gamma, delta. And it's going to choose random ones. And then it's going to place these systems at an X and a Y. So basically on the quadrant map, that's where these coordinates come into play, because it tells you where that system is in the quadrant. And we're going to be working on this today, is my intent, but I just set it up at these rough bounds. And then each system is going to have a sun, so I set the sun size as 20 and add a random 80 onto that, so the sun size will vary. And then a planet array, or planets array, and then it calls this function generate planets. So the generate planets is here, so we initialize the planets array. I'm creating right now 4 planets in between, and adding between 1 and 4 random. Set a particular size, set particular speed, because I'm actually wanting to vary the size and the speed of the planets. I'm choosing a random planet to be an asteroid belt, so that'll come later, and a jump point as well. So there'll be jump points that are either on planets or they will be there instead of the planets. So we then go over the number of planets, then at this point we put the planet into the planets array, choosing size, speed, whether it's an asteroid or not, jump point or not, and then of course I'm varying the size, increasing the size for each planet out from the sun and getting slower as you get away from the sun. So I just fiddled with these values until I felt it was moving, at a pace that I thought was acceptable. All right, so that is creating the system. And this has to do with rendering, so we're not going to cover that now. And then if we take a look at the planet, because that planet is being added by adding these values here, and that's basically simply plugging in those values. But what this also does is it assigns the sprite for the planet as well as the biome for the planet randomly. So that's basically how it's generating, these 30 systems in the 4 different quadrants right now. All right, so I also did a lot of refactoring with the main.rb. So I've got all the requires here. The tick, I set up an FPS counter. I set up a dedicated debugging that'll appear in the top left if I ever wanted to debug something. And then I put in, someone recommended doing this as a reset game. I'm sorry, I can't remember who mentioned that, but I went ahead and implemented that. Then apart from that, this basically just sends, based upon the scene, it sends it to the right file based upon that, or basically the right method. And then I did a lot of refactoring for each of my scenes. So there's now the title scene, the base scene. This is where you land either a planet or a space station, basically a base, but then there'll be ways to manage your cargo, manage your ship, and of course space itself. So I'm following this similar pattern that I saw in a lot of the examples where, okay, wait, so args GTX reset next tick. All right, I'll have to look at that for the FPS counter. Oh, okay. So someone's in the chat's recommending reset next tick. Reset. Okay. Thank you, Sire, for that. So it won't reset in the middle of the tick. Okay, so I'm going to have this notes here. Okay, so I saw this, going back to this, I saw this pattern where basically state or defaults were applied and then things were rendered and then inputs were accepted. So I kind of, for the scenes, I'm following that pattern to see how it feels. So basically the state is established here for this particular scene, then it renders out everything you see on the screen, and then it accepts the input. And as you can see here, when you click the new game, it sets up the state, and then it does galaxy new to create that new galaxy and sends you basically to the base scene at that point. So that's kind of how this is all. So all the 3 classes, that's how it all gets called here. Now I did have a question if someone has an idea, but whenever I am here and I reset, so we've got 4 planets. So I'm going to reset, new game, launch, go to navigation. It still has 4 planets. So just something's flashing here. I'm going to click it off. Okay. So if I reset again, new game, launch, go to navigation, it's still the same 4 planets. So my question is, I had expected my galaxy to be reset, but it's not being reset. Seed needs to be changed. Okay. So is there a way to do that? When I hit the reset button? Okay, so you're saying every time I reset, it's going to use the same seed. Okay. Yeah, because if I stop the whole thing, it's like if I close it and then I start it, then yeah, now I got a ton of planets. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. So I'll have to figure out. Someone look in the chat. Changing seed allows you to test your changes with the same seed. Okay. All right. So maybe I'll have an option to reset the seed if I want to. Okay. All right. Well, I'll make a note to think how I want to do that. Is there, does anyone know if how you would change the seed? Okay, well, try it, see if it blows up. Just start the whole thing for good measure. So 6, if I reset, still 6. Okay. All right, well, I'll look at that at some point. It's not critical now, because some ways it's good to know there's going to be a consistent planets for some of it. I'll take a look at that later. Okay, so thank you for that. And so the base scene is very simplistic, just renders some buttons. And the spacing looks like this, so setting the state of different buttons. And I kind of came up this idea for the UI for right now. I'm not using classes yet for the UI. I think I will eventually, but I wanted to namespace the UI under its own state and then have windows, because windows are going to pop up and then windows are going to appear in like the right pane or left pane or pop-up windows. So I wanted to nest or put it in a hierarchy so that when I change a scene, I can just set the UI state to nil to be able to just wipe the whole UI to redraw it for the next scene. or even if I'm clicking off of a menu, then being able to turn off the window that pops up. So that's kind of how I was thinking about doing the UI. But if people have different ways of working through their UI, I'd love to hear it, because I didn't see some examples of some of what I was trying to do, because I think this is going to be a UI heavy game. But yeah. Sorry, I'm just looking in the chat here. Okay. All right. So this, okay, so we're on the space scene. We're looking at rendering to space. So we set up the buttons here. We set up the navigation window, the missions window, and the comms window. And what I'm doing right now is this is hard coded to go to a particular system. So it's only going to the first system out of 30 that exists. That's what the navigation brings up now. And it can also render the right pane if a planet has been clicked on, basically. So if we look at the information down here, basically if nav planets exist, we're looking to see if a planet has been clicked on, and then we turn on the right pane for that purpose. And then if the travel button is hit, take you to the base scene based upon the biome, which changes out the image that appears. That's all it does right now, and then resets the state's UI. And then we've got some other functions I've added down here. I'll probably eventually put these in a class, but they're for rendering just that UI window and the right pane. Now, in terms of actually rendering the system, that's done in the system class itself. So I set up two different methods. One is building the system, and this is what establishes the state of the solar system. So we define the sun's always going to be in the same place on the map, or excuse me, in the state. And then we calculate the sun center based upon the size of the sun. And then we set up in the state the nav sun. I'm considering it the nav sun because it's for the navigational map in particular. And show it the sprite here. And then this is just start an arbitrary distance from the sun and start rendering out the planets. And again, this is all happening in the state. So I shouldn't say render. Basically, create in state where the planet is. So I'm building the planets in the state so that I can be able to click on them. So I calculate the x and the y based upon this from the center of the sun to the amount of distance, have the size of the planet, which comes from the planet size, the planet sprite again, which is a component of the planet, because these are the planets that are coming from the galaxy that was initially generated. We have a start angle, so that makes sure that each one is started at a a different angle. They're not all in a line going around the sun, but they're staggered. Establishing the speed of each planet. Again, I wanted faster and closer to the sun, slower on the outside. And then I'm actually putting the whole planet object here to be able to reference it as I click on it to bring up information about it. So this is one thing that I was contemplating whether this makes sense or not, in that this planet array here is from the galaxy, whereas I'm rendering out, I'm creating something I'm calling a nav planet and putting it in a new array I'm calling nav planets. So I'm using the state that exists in planets as a reference to create the nav planet display. Now, part of the reason I did this is because I'm increasing the distance each time of the planets across one another. But I suppose I could probably build the planets with that built into the state. And I didn't want to pollute or add to my general state of the planets. I didn't want to add the X and the Y and the height and the width, all of those I didn't want to add all of those to the core planets that existed in the galaxy. So I'm basically choosing to render a subset, but I have a reference to the core planet object in the galaxy. Do people have, just checking if anyone in chat does, people have an opinion on whether this is an okay pattern to use, or should I really be storing all of this, all of this information in the core planet class? Or is it depends on what you want to do. But while I'm doing that, I'll go ahead and move on. So the last function here is actually renders out the system. So this handles the state, and this actually renders out the system. So I'm basically putting the state of the sun, output it as a sprite, and then for each nav planet, doing the magic to get it to work out. As I said, I keep the planet info in a planet class. Yeah, I have the planet info, core planet info in the planet class, but you're saying you would even put the X, the Y, the width, the height, all of this in the planet class? Yeah, I have accessors and readers for, again, the core part of the planet, but just not when I go to render it out. I'm not putting all of that detail in there. Okay. All right, so, and then to render the system, so I'm doing an iteration over the state nav planets. And I'm, again, this is from the solar system example in the examples of the Dragon Ruby documentation. Yep, okay. So first, defining the angle, and that is based upon the tick count. Now, I slow this down because the speed is actually lower. with this each planet's speed. So each planet's going to be a little bit slower, and then I'm adding the start angle to it. So it's all going to start at a different point around the sun. And then I'm going to oh, this is interesting. That might be a bug. Why am I adding it twice? Well, not a bug. Still works. All right, I'll have to check that out. Well, does it still work if I do that? Still works. Yes, undocumented feature. Hilarious. All right, well, there you go. Okay, so again, that's the start angle, and then you take the angle, and based upon the distance from the center of the sun, you do a vector x on it, and that establishes how far out it should be, and then the vector y does the y, and then at that point, you set the nav planet's x based on the sun center plus the distance, and then minus half of the nav planet size to get it in the center of the planet as well. And from doing that, you then just output the sprites. All right, so that was a lot of discussion, but yeah, so that pretty much gets us working. So I'll be here all week. So at this point, like I said, this is hard-coded to go to this particular system. And I also want to have a way to flip the map from a system view to a quadrant view and then be able to choose each quadrant. So let's get started with that. So I'm going to need to be in space. And I haven't given this too much thought yet. So I want to add some additional buttons. I don't know if I want to use these big buttons down here necessarily, but we'll try it. So let's see if well, I don't want them to go there. I actually want them to go only when the navigation pops up. So here, so render UI window. So I'm doing it here. Actually, this would be a good thing to test here. Polluting my state in here. I'm gonna have to look at that. All right. So I'll call this map toggle to start. And get a bit bigger. Whoa, not that big. All right. And then I'm going to do the label for it. I want to see what happens with this. All right, so here's a question I'm trying to figure out. So I put at X and Y the labels in the map toggle at the exact same X and Y, but as you can see, they're offset. Does anyone know why that is? I think there's also a vertical alignment enum. Let me see if I can. Maybe that has something to do with it. So looking up vertical alignment enum. Ah! Victory! Now I can fix the launch button as well. And that is... There you go. So I want to get a lower. Not that low. what was that set to? All right. Well. All right, looking at the quadrant. I want to make this a little bit wider. Yeah, I gotta figure out how to do proper buttons for this as well. But I'll just do this to start. Okay. So this sets up the map toggle. And now to do the input. So if arg's inside the rect, I'm calling this map toggle. Toggle map, and I'll just debug text. So if I click that, toggle map. Okay. So now that needs to do something. So now I need to actually render out the map. So this builds out the system. So maybe I want a build quadrant method here. Basically, put the quadrant in the state. Do I need to do that? I'm thinking, is this redundant? I will need, well, I'm going to go ahead and go for it right now. I'll just follow what I was doing. So instead of planets, these will be systems. There is no sun, so this is not needed. don't really need to worry about this. So for system in systems, but I want to select where quadrant equals, I need to know what quadrant I'm on. So I'm going to pass that in. And so then well, these already have, system already has an X and a Y. Is that all I need? Maybe to start. So I hate to say it, do I just need I just need to do that? Yeah, of course, it'll be too easy. So trying to debug to see what's, let me do that. Okay, so there's the galaxy. Now can I args dot state dot galaxy. Oh, right. Well, oh, I'm an idiot. Well, did I capitalize it? Duh. Okay. Whoops. All right. So if I try the build quadrant now, there you go. Well, it's working. Okay. Well, that puts those systems into the now systems area. So if that's clicked, well, just to get something working. So args.state.galaxy dot build quadrant args alpha. In theory, that should not crash. So basically hard-coded this. Yeah, so I don't know why, but that's just the message that Dragon Ruby's giving. And I don't even know if it's Dragon Ruby or M Ruby or if it's Ruby that's asking for this. So I mean, I'm just obliging, but yeah, not sure. Okay. So I've hard-coded the alpha quadrant, setting up. Now we need to render it out. So where's that? All right, so the map toggle. Instead of just doing this, I want to actually the args state UI window dot nav Ooh, sorry. I want it to maybe set this to quadrant. Yeah, I'm really gonna have to think about this. And actually, I'll make this a button. Okay. All right, so toggling the map. So when rendering, I want to say if this is true, basically I want to render quadrant. So how do we render? Quadrant. I'll just do this as a starting place. So you're saying doing that instead of building the quadrant? When you're saying have a state var that points to the current quadrant? Well, I do want these nav systems in an array. Yeah, I'm thinking about. I'll think about doing that. Let me continue on this path for a second to see where it where it leads. So yeah, because I don't have a quadrant class yet. Because I didn't know if it would be needed. But maybe that would make things easier. I'll have to see. Yeah. All right. So for each system in this. But do I really need to do that? How did I do? Um, I'm going to hold off doing that for right now. Just get something on the screen doing something. Then it's, can't remember. Blue squares. Well, does that render anything? Crash. Oh, I still need to do this. So I need to do args. So oh. $29. Right. So setting nav to true, so of course it doesn't have a quadrant. Somewhere else I'm setting nav to true. Here. So this starts making me think about the UI. Are there any, does anyone have any ideas of good patterns to use for the UI? Because I think that's, so far, that's one of the big things I'm struggling with. Yeah, Chris says I'm trying to figure out UI patterns out myself. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I don't want to do this, but I'll just hack something for now. means gotta set. Oops, too far. Hey, something worked. So, oh, singular. So I wonder. All right, I need to think constrain. Maybe if I add 100. 50. I think if I reset it, I think I gotta, whoop. Oh, worked. Okay. So now, that's the quadrant map. I want those to be, excuse me, yeah, that's a quadrant map of the systems in that quadrant. All right, I want to create. Okay. Yeah, I gotta check out the seed stuff, but I'll do that off stream rather than show my incompetence on stream, I think. So or I'll read up and just do some testing to see how that works. Okay. Yeah, because the stream does enough to show my incompetence. Hardy. I don't know about that. Well, I mean, no, yeah. Oh, I mean, he's doing some stuff that I'm like, I'm trying to actively avoid too much complexity in math. Because I want to move forward, have forward progress, whereas he's like going straight into A stars and all this stuff. Hey, Levi. Yeah, and then he tests with RSpec. Oh boy. Alrighty. So this is we're looking at the alpha quadrant here, but now I want to put some buttons up so that we can choose different quadrants as well as maybe just have it highlighted so you know which one you're at. So put the button here. Oh, and the fact that it needs to toggle. Well, yeah, that would be a thing to do too. All right, well, how do I get that working? So if this is true, I think just well, that's now see my logic. Oh, I already erased it. Great. Yeah, I don't know what I'm questioning. My brain is not working. Oof. Oh, I still need to set it to true, dummy. Yeah. Ugh. All right. Okay, I want buttons. I want buttons. Well, I'm just going to do 2 for now, and I'm going to refactor this later. Just realized something I actually need to do. UI dot window. Yeah. Maybe. Oh, wait. Oh, I'll go back to that. So for now, I'll just call this alpha, and I'll just put up 2 buttons for now. And I think I need to look into primitives to be able, because I think with that I can define the labels of the buttons at the same time without having to move around these a lot. But that's still on my to-do list to do. Going back here, I'll make your comment. Yeah, I don't know if I want to set nav quadrant to false. I mean, maybe it'll work. Okay. Oh, have we crashed? We have buttons. We have some buttons. Need to be. Well. I think that's gonna be way outside what I need. Eh, that's okay. I can shorten them up. Too short? Okay. I'll go with that for now. And then so here's a question. Do I have to go with a solid, or can I fill in a border? Like if I wanted this to be white background, black lettering to signify that that's the quadrant. Or do I need to use can I use a border, or do I need to use a solid? Can you fill it? Can you fill in a border? Like, is there something I can add to the borders to get it to fill in, or not really? Like, here's my definition of a border. Can I add something to it so it will fill in? Yeah, okay. But in terms of like showing a button activation, I guess do when people use buttons, are they generally always using so that to border method and to solid method, is that, yeah. So can I flip it like to so is to solid a valid, right? So is to solid and to border, is that a valid function? That sends it to borders, or you have to, so I'm just look. Okay. Yeah, I need to really look into this. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Maybe switching them. Okay. All right. Well, for now, so yeah, I'll look into doing that. But for now, I need to. Right. All right. So yeah, yeah. All right. So what I want to do now is maybe just, sorry, I'm going back and forth in my brain what I want to do next. I think I want to be able to flip. So basically this initializes itself to alpha. I want to be able to switch it. So if I need to look at the input. So if I'm on the map, this is what happens inside a map toggle. So if we're, what do I call it? Button map. Alpha. Don't need that. Don't need this. Wait, it's already defined. Just rebuild the state, I suppose. Oops. In theory, do that. I'm sure there's a more efficient way to do this, but does this work? Okay, I'm missing something. Button map alpha. I'm an idiot. Of course, button map beta should be working. What did I do wrong with that? not quite sure why this not's working. Oh, am I just an idiot? Okay, it's working, but it doesn't do anything. Okay. So asking to build the beta quadrant, but why isn't that working? So I'm building the quadrant, presumably, but it's not. No, but I have a systems variable. So building the quadrant, it should be changing the nav systems. And it changes based upon the quadrant passed in. All right, well, it's changing the state, but it's not rendering. And these are entirely different. X and Y. So Where do we render quadrant? So it's changing the state, but it's not rendering differently. I'm a little bit of at a little bit of a loss. So this debug output is showing the state, the number of systems that should appear. When I click this, I see the state change. So there's different X and Y's that these should be rendered at. When I switch between the different quadrants, I get different systems. Different X, Y's are showing up. But yet the rendering's not happening. And the rendering is based upon... So basically, this renders the quadrant, and what it's doing is it's grabbing the state that I'm outputting here. So I see the state changing, but yet the rendering's not changing, so I don't quite know what to do. Because I know this should be called, otherwise it wouldn't render anything. So it's rendering something, but it's still rendering I'm basically up here is where I'm setting what's in the state. So I'm saying only of those of a given quadrant, put those systems in this array. So they are the systems of the alpha quadrant or the systems of the beta quadrant. You're not sure this makes sense? Well, I call down here when you click a button, I say build the quadrant for beta or build the quadrant for alpha. And that's what, when you click the button, you can see this is the debug output shows the state. So I see the state changing, but it's not rendering. So that's what I'm kind of at the loss. So it's doing this fine. It's building it, it's storing it in the state. Yeah, sorry. It's sorry, it may be a little bit hard to see on the screen. But I'm just trying to understand why. Okay, well, I mean, I was just doing it here for convenience, so I can see that there are different values in there. It's not the same. And yeah, it doesn't show all of them, but at least I can see they're showing up different. Like there's X and Y's are different for at least this first case. And then if I so there's 7. I don't even remember which one I clicked on. Oh, it's 7 on alpha, beta. Doesn't seem. All right, well, that's not. Okay. Whoops. So it's printing that yet. Showing the same thing here. I expected that to change. And the console puts the value of new systems. Back to the render code. So you're saying puts here? Oh, let me try something. Let me see what the state is right here just for test. Aha! I am an idiot. Well, here's the danger of this. Well, not that. This. Basically, this is resetting at every tick to alpha. That's the problem. Sorry, guys. So like if I do this, yeah. But I need to, do I need to initialize it? Like if I reset, does it error out? Yeah, so I need to initialize it in some way. Is it bad to, because like normally I've seen setting the defaults here, like I'm setting a number of defaults here, and I can give it this and then it gets out down below. Is it bad to have updating the state through build quadrant? Yeah, well, it's actually just building the system, so I could do this. Of course, that's not that much code to begin with. And then, what was it? Well, okay, so do, and now I need to, yeah. Well, this is render. Oops. Ugh, finally. Cool. Thank you, Levi. Thank you, Sire. Trainu. All right. Well, I think that's enough Despaghettified. Yeah, I'm trying to still feel my way around the best patterns to use with this. So yeah. So so thanks again for joining me. I think I've done enough damage, and I'll do some more damage later off stream and share it next time, probably next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Although if you're watching this, feel free to put in, if you're watching this later, feel free to put in the comments if you'd rather me to move it an hour plus or minus 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, if you'd want to participate in the stream. Apart from that, feel free to check out. Oh, hey, see ya, 11. So, thanks for joining me. Check out the rubberduckdevshow.com where you can see upcoming shows that are coming up and the streams that happen on Tuesdays and Thursday. Apart from that, I will talk to you guys later. Bye. And bye if I can actually find how to turn off the stream. Okay. See ya.